A Course in Miracles Readings with Anna Kujawa, video number 43. A Course in Miracles, the complete and annotated edition, chapter 15, section 9, Relationships Without Limit. As the ego would limit your perception of others to their body, so would your higher mind release your vision and let you see the great rays shining from them. As your ego would limit your perception of others to their body, so would your higher mind release your vision and let you see the great rays shining from them. Great rays shining from them so unlimited that those great rays reach to God. It is this shift in vision that is accomplished in the holy instant. But it is needful for you to learn just what this shift entails, so that you will become willing to make this shift in vision permanent. Given this willingness to have your vision shift from their body to the great rays shining from them, giving that willingness for that to become a permanent vision. This willingness determines that it will become permanent. But once you have accepted this vision as the only perception that you want, this vision of the great rays in them is translated into knowledge by the part that God Himself plays in the plan of the healing of man, because that's the only step in the plan that your teacher within understands. Therefore, in the shift in vision, there will be no delay when you are ready for it. In this shift in vision, there will be no delay when you are ready for it. God is ready now, but you are not. And so, our task is but to continue as fast as possible the necessary process of looking straight at all that interferes with this vision, and seeing these interferences exactly as they are. Because it's impossible to recognize as wholly without gratification what you think you want. The body is the symbol of the ego, just like the ego is the symbol of separation. And both the ego and the body are nothing more than attempts to limit communication, and thereby to make communication impossible. Because communication must be unlimited in order to have meaning. And deprived of meaning, communication will not satisfy you completely. Yet communication remains the only means by which you can establish real relationships. Real relationships have no limits, having been established by God. In the holy instant, where the great rays replace the body in your awareness, the recognition of relationships without limits is given you. But to see this relationships without limits, it is necessary to give up every use that your ego has for the body, and to accept the fact that the ego has no purpose that you would share with it. The ego has no purpose you would share with it. Because the ego would limit everyone to a body for the ego's purposes. And so while you think the ego has a purpose, you will choose to utilize the means by which the ego tries to turn its purpose into accomplishment, the body. But this will never be accomplished. Yet you have surely realized that the ego, whose goals are altogether unattainable, will strive for its goals with all its might, and it will strive for its goals with strength that you have given it. Even though your ego's goals will never be accomplished, they represent the impossible, your ego will still strive for its goals with all its might and with the strength that you have given to the ego. Yet it is impossible to divide your strength between heaven and hell, God and ego, and still release your power unto creation, which is the only purpose for which your power was given you. Because love would always give increase. Limits are demanded, representing the ego's demands to make little and ineffectual. Limits are demanded. Love always gives increase. Limits are demanded. Limits represent the ego's demands to make little and ineffectual. And so, if you limit your vision of another to their body, which you will do as long as you would not release them from their body, then you have denied their gift to you. Because their body cannot give their gift to you. And so don't seek their gift to you through your body. But your minds are already continuous, and your mind's union need only be accepted, and the loneliness in heaven is gone. Don't try to keep them, don't try to identify them and see them in their body. Don't limit them to their body, but instead see only and accept only that your mind's union is continuous. And then all the loneliness in your experience is gone. They are not their body, and our mind's union is continuous. So, if you would but let the higher mind tell you of the love of God for you, and the need that your creations have to be with you forever, then you would begin to experience the attraction of the eternal. Instead of being attracted to guilt, you would be attracted, you would experience the attraction of the eternal. Because no one can hear the higher mind speak of the love of God for you and long remain willing to linger here. Because it is your will to be in heaven, which is reality. And reality and heaven is where you are complete and quiet and in such sure and loving relationships that any limits are impossible. That's where you will to be, and that's where you are. That's heaven. That's reality. The place where you are, you experience yourself as complete and quiet and in such sure and loving relationships that any limits are impossible. would you not exchange your little relationships for this? Because the body is little and limited. The body is little and limited, and only those whom you would see without the limits that the ego wants to impose on them, only those folks can offer you the gift of freedom. You have no conception of the limits you have placed on your perception, and you have no idea of all the loveliness you could see. Only this you must remember. The attraction of guilt opposes the attraction of God. Now God's attraction for you remains unlimited, but because your power, being God's power, is as great as God's power, you can still turn away from love. Remember, what you invest in guilt, you withdraw from God. And then your sight grows dim, and your sight grows weak and limited, because you have attempted to separate the Creator from the creation, and you have attempted to limit the communication between the Creator and the created by being attracted to guilt, by limiting them to their body. So don't seek for love and healing and joy in further separation. That means don't limit your vision of God's children to what interferes with their release and to what their higher mind must undo to set them free, the body. Because their belief in limits has imprisoned them. So don't limit your vision of them to what interferes with their release. Don't limit your vision to that which their higher mind must undo to set them free. For their belief in limits has imprisoned them. When the body ceases to attract you, and when you place no value on the body as a means of getting anything, then and then only will there be no interference in communication, and then your thoughts will be as free as God's. And how does that occur? Well, as you let your higher mind teach you how to use the body only for purposes of communication, and you renounce the body's use for separation, which means attack, which the ego sees in the body, you will then learn that you have no need of a body at all. In the holy instant, there are no bodies. And in the holy instant, you experience only the attraction of God. And accepting the attraction of God as undivided, you join God completely in an instant. Because in that holy instant, you're placing no limits on your union with God. In that moment where you experience only the attraction of God. In that instant, you're placing no limits on your union with God. And then the reality of this relationship you have with your Creator becomes the only truth that you could ever want. All truth is here in your relationship with your Creator. It is in your power to delay it is in your power in time to delay the perfect union of Creator and creation. Because in this world, the attraction of guilt does stand between your Creator and you. Neither time nor season, though, means anything in reality or eternity. Yes, it's in your power and time to delay the perfect union of your source and you, yes. Because in this world, the attraction of guilt does seem to stand between you and your source. But neither time nor season means anything in eternity. But here in time, it is your higher mind's function to use both time and season. But not as the ego uses time and season. For instance, this is the season when you would celebrate my birth into this world. Yet you know not how to do it. So let your higher mind teach you how to celebrate my birth into the world, and let me celebrate your birth through your higher mind. The only gift that I can accept of you is the gift I gave you. So release me as I willed your release. The time of our real self, our true self, we celebrate together. Because the time of our real self, the time when our real self is born into the world, has no meaning if we are apart. The holy instant is truly the time of Christ. For in this liberating instant, no guilt is laid upon any of the children of God, and the children of God's unlimited power is thus restored to us. The holy instant is the instant where no guilt is laid on any child of God, and then the child of God's unlimited power is thus restored to them, to us. And says our teacher to us, what other gift can you offer me when only this I will to offer you? I only will to offer you release from guilt. Would you offer me any other gift except the release from guilt? And to see me is to see me in everyone. And to see me is to offer everyone the gift you offer me. Says our teacher, I am incapable of receiving sacrifice, as incapable of receiving sacrifice as God is. And every sacrifice you ask of yourself, you're also asking of me, says our teacher. So learn now that sacrifice of any kind is nothing but a limitation imposed on giving. What is sacrifice? Learn now that sacrifice is of any kind is nothing but a limitation imposed on giving. I am sacrificing. What I am sacrificing is the limit I put on love's giving to me, and the love I receive from love as I am limiting my love to others. We who are one cannot give separately, which means when you are willing to accept our relationship as real, then guilt will hold no attraction for you. Because in our union, in our relationship, you will accept all your brothers and sisters. The gift of union was the only gift I was born to give. Union, not sacrifice, not exclusion. Union. The gift of union is the only gift I was born to give, says our teacher to us. Give union to me, says our teacher, that you may have it. The time of our real self being born again is the time appointed for the gift of freedom offered to everyone. And by your acceptance of the gift of freedom, you have offered the gift of freedom to everyone. It is in your power to make this season holy, because it is in your power to make the time of your real self and our real relationship be now. Chapter 15, Section 10, The Demand for Sacrifice. It is possible to do this all at once, because there is only one shift in perception that's necessary. That's because you made only one mistake. Now, this one mistake seems like many mistakes, but these mistakes are all the same. Because even though the ego and this mistake takes many forms, the ego and this mistake is always the same idea. And what is that one same idea that the ego in this mistake is, whatever form it takes? It is this: what is not love is always fear, and nothing else. It is not necessary to follow fear through all the circuitous routes by which the ego and fear burrows underground and hides in darkness to emerge in forms quite different from what it is. But it is necessary to examine each form of fear as long as you would retain the principle that governs all the forms of fear. But when you are willing to regard all the forms of fear not as separate but as different manifestations of the same idea, fear, and an idea you don't want, then all the forms of fear go together. The idea is simply this: you believe it's possible to be host to the ego or hostage to God. That's the choice you think you have. I either be host to the ego or I'm going to be hostage to God. That's the choice I think I have. That's the belief I have. That's the belief of all the options that I have. I either be a host to my fear or a hostage to God. This is the choice you think you have, and this is the decision that you believe you must make. And you see no other alternatives, because you cannot accept the fact that sacrifice gets nothing. And that's because sacrifice is so essential to your thought system that love and happiness apart from sacrifice means nothing to you. Your confusion of sacrifice and love is so profound that you cannot conceive of love without sacrifice. And it is this you must look at. Sacrifice is attack, not love. And if you would but accept this one idea, your fear of love would vanish. Guilt cannot last when the idea of sacrifice has been removed. Because if there must be sacrifice, as you are convinced, then someone must pay and someone must get. And then the only question left is to be decided is how much is the price for getting what? As host to the ego, you believe that you can give all your guilt away, whatever you think, and purchase peace. And that's because to you it seems like the payment doesn't seem to be yours. Now, while it is obvious that the ego does demand payment, the ego never seems to be demanding payment of you. Because you are unwilling to recognize that the ego, why is it that even though it does seem that the ego, it is obvious that the ego demands payment of others, it never seems like the ego is demanding payment of you? Why is that? That's because you are unwilling to recognize that the ego, which you invited, is treacherous only to those who think they are its host. You're unwilling to recognize that. And that's why you believe that while your attack thoughts and sacrifice demand sacrifice of others, demand payment, it doesn't seem like your attack thoughts and your fear demands payment of you. The ego which you invited is treacherous only to those who think they are its host. Only to those who say, yes, I will host the ego. Now, your ego will never let you perceive that, because this recognition will make the ego homeless. Because when this recognition dawns clearly, you will not be deceived by any form the ego takes to protect itself from your sight. Each form that the ego takes to protect it from your sight will be recognized as just a cover for the one idea that hides behind them all, which is what? The idea that love demands sacrifice, and that love is therefore inseparable from attack and fear, and that guilt is the price of love which must be paid by fear. When you recognize that the ego is treacherous only to the one that hosts those fearful thoughts, not the ones whom you projected upon, when you realize that the ego is treacherous only to the one who hosts those fear thoughts, those attack thoughts, then your ego will be homeless, and you will recognize every form of ego as just a cover for the one idea that hides behind them all, the idea that love demands sacrifice. That is the one idea that hides behind all the forms the ego takes to hide itself, protect itself from your sight, from you seeing it's hurting only you. And so, of course, how fearful then has God become to you? And how great a sacrifice do you believe God's love demands? If you've accepted the belief that love demands sacrifice, then how much sacrifice must God, the author of love, demand? And so how fearful have we become of God? And if love demands sacrifice, then total love, like God, would demand total sacrifice. And so it seems like the ego demands less of you than God. It seems like the ego demands less sacrifice, because less love, than God. And of the two, the ego is judged as the lesser of the two evils. One to be feared a little, the ego, but the other, God, to be destroyed. For you see love as destruction, and your only question is who is to be destroyed, you or another. And if you see love as destruction, then better to choose the lesser of two evils, the lesser love called the ego, which isn't really love at all. Seeing love as destruction, because you see love as demanding sacrifice, then your only question is who is to be destroyed, you or the other. And you're seeking to answer this question, who's going to be destroyed, me or them? You're seeking to answer this question in your special relationships in which you are both destroyer and destroyed, but able to be neither completely. And this, you think, saves you from God. Having relationships where it's all just about who is going to be destroyed, me or them, or actually it's both, but neither both completely. That is what I think saves me from God, whose total love would completely destroy me. You think that everyone outside you demands sacrifice. You think that everyone outside yourself demands your sacrifice. But you do not see that only you demand sacrifice, and only of yourself. Yet the demand of sacrifice is so savage and so fearful that you cannot accept the demand of sacrifice where it is, which is in you, your choice. The real price of not accepting where the demand of sacrifice really is, in you, not them, has been so great that you have given God away rather than look at it. Because if God would demand total sacrifice of you, then you thought it safer to project God outward and away from you. You thought it safer to not be host to God. Because to God you ascribed the ego's treachery, inviting the ego to take God's place to protect you from God. And you don't realize that it is what you invited in, the ego, that would destroy you and does demand total sacrifice of you. You don't see that. You don't recognize that. No partial sacrifice will appease this savage guest, the ego, whom you did invite in, because the ego is an invader who but seems to offer kindness, but always to make the sacrifice complete. You will not succeed in being partial hostage to this invader, the ego, because the ego doesn't keep any promises and it doesn't keep any bargains, which means your ego really leaves you nothing. You won't succeed in being partial hostage to your fearful, angry mind, because your ego keeps no bargains, which means it's going to leave you nothing. Nor can you be partial host to the ego. You will have to choose between total freedom and total bondage, because there are no alternatives but total freedom or total bondage. Total freedom in God or total bondage to the ego. You have tried many compromises in the attempt to avoid recognizing the one decision that must be made. And yet it is the recognition of the decision just as it is that makes the decision so easy. Freedom is simple, being of God, and therefore very easy to understand. Freedom is simple, being of God, which means freedom is very easy to understand. But do not try to project freedom from you and see it outside yourself. In you are both the question and the answer. In you is both the demand for sacrifice and the peace of God. Don't be afraid to recognize sacrifice solely as your own making. Don't fear to recognize as solely of your making the whole idea of sacrifice. That means don't seek safety by attempting to protect yourself from where sacrifice is not. Your brothers and your sisters and your Creator have become very fearful to you. And so now you're trying to bargain with them for a few special relationships in which you think you see some scraps of safety. But don't try longer to keep apart your thoughts, love demands sacrifice, and the thought that's been given you, love that demands no sacrifice. And when these two thoughts are brought together and perceived where they are in your mind, then the choice between these two beliefs, these two thoughts, is nothing more than a gentle awakening, and as simple as opening your eyes to daylight when you have no more need of sleep. The sign of Christmas is a star, a light in darkness. Don't see this star outside yourself, but shining in the heaven within, and accept it. Accept this shining star within you as the sign that the time of your real self has come. Your real self, your true self, comes demanding nothing. No sacrifice of any kind of anyone is asked by your true self. And in the presence of your true self, the one self we share, the whole idea of sacrifice loses all meaning, because you are host to God. And you need but invite the real self, your real self in, who is there in you already, by recognizing that your real self's host is one, which means no thought alien to love's oneness can abide with your real self. Love must be total to give your real self welcome, for the presence of holiness creates the holiness which surrounds it, which means no fear can touch the host of love, who cradles love in the time of love. Because the host is as holy as the perfect innocence that host protects, and whose power protects it. So, this Christmas, give to your higher mind, your teacher within, everything that would hurt you. Let yourself be healed completely, that you may join with your teacher in healing. And let us celebrate our release together by releasing everyone with us. And don't leave anything behind, because release is total. And when you have accepted release with me, says our teacher, then you will give release with me, says our teacher. And all pain and all littleness will disappear in our relationship, says our teacher. Our relationship, which is as innocent as our relationship, with our Father, Mother, God, and as powerful. Pain will be brought to our relationship, says our teacher to us, and pain will disappear in our presence. And without pain, there can be no sacrifice. Without sacrifice, their love must be. Chapter 15, Section 11, Release from Sacrifice. You who believe that sacrifice is love must learn that sacrifice is separation from love. Because sacrifice brings guilt just as surely as love brings peace. In other words, guilt is the condition of sacrifice, just like peace is the condition for the awareness of your relationship with Father, Mother, God. For through guilt you excluded your Father, Mother, God, and your brothers and sisters from yourself. And through peace you will invite them all back and realize that they are where your invitation bids them be. What you excluded from yourself seems fearful because you endowed what you excluded from yourself with fear, which means that's why you tried to cast it out, even though it's a part of you. And who can perceive part of themselves as loathsome and live within themselves in peace? And who can try to resolve the perceived conflict of heaven and hell in yourself by casting heaven out and giving heaven the attributes of hell without experiencing yourself as incomplete and lonely? You cast heaven outside of yourself and give heaven the attributes of hell. How can you experience yourself as except incomplete and lonely if you cast out what is part of yourself? And so as long as you perceive the body as your reality, so long will you perceive yourself as lonely and deprived. And so long will you also perceive yourself as a victim of sacrifice and justified in sacrificing others, as long as you see the body as your reality. Because who could thrust the Creator and who could thrust heaven and its Creator aside without a sense of sacrifice and loss? And who could suffer sacrifice and loss without attempting to restore themselves? Yet how can you accomplish restoring yourself when the basis of your attempt to restore yourself is the belief in the reality of the deprivation? Because deprivation breeds attack. Because deprivation is the belief that attack is justified. And so, as long as you would retain the deprivation, as long as you would retain the belief in deprivation, then attack becomes salvation, which means sacrifice becomes love. And so it is. In all your seeking for love, you're really seeking for sacrifice. And boy, do you find it. But you didn't find love, because it's impossible to deny what love is and still recognize it. The meaning of love lies in what you've cast outside of yourself. And the meaning of love has no meaning at all apart from you. It's what you have preferred to keep, the ego, that has no meaning. While all that you would keep away, God, holds all the meaning in the universe and holds the universe together in its meaning, is what you have cast outside of yourself so that you could keep and take in the ego. you chose to take in and host and harbor and protect the ego. And what you chose to keep away holds all the meaning of the universe and holds the universe together in its meaning. For unless the universe were joined in you, the universe would be apart from God, and to be without God is to be without meaning. But in the holy instant, the condition of love is met. Why? Because in the holy instant, the minds are joined without the body's interference. And where there is communication, there is peace. The Prince of Peace was born to reestablish the condition of love. How? By teaching that communication remains unbroken even if the body is destroyed. Why was the Prince of Peace born? To re-establish the condition of love. How? By teaching that communication remains unbroken even if the body is destroyed, provided that you don't see the body as the necessary means of communication. Provided that you see not the body as the necessary means of communication. And if you understand that the body is not a necessary means of communication, then you will realize that to sacrifice the body is to sacrifice nothing. And you will realize that communication, which must be of the mind, cannot be sacrificed. Where then is sacrifice? Well, the lesson I was born to teach, says our teacher, and still would teach to all my brothers and my sisters, is that sacrifice is nowhere and love is everywhere. Because communication embraces everything, and in the peace that communication establishes, love comes of itself. So don't let any despair darken the joy of this season, because the time of the rebirth of our real self into the world is meaningless apart from joy. Let us join in celebrating peace by demanding no sacrifice of anyone. Because by you demanding no sacrifice of anyone, so will you offer me the love I offer you, says our teacher. And what could be more joyous than to perceive that we are deprived of nothing? Now that's the message of this season, where we celebrate light, the entrance of light, the light in the darkness. That's the message of this season, where we celebrate the light in the darkness, the star shining within us. This message which I give you, that you may give it and return this message to our Creator, who gave it to me. Because in this season where we celebrate the light in the darkness, the light of our true self entering the world and being reborn into the world, in this time, this season where we celebrate that, communication with Father, Mother, God is restored, and Father, Mother, God joins us in the celebration of their creation of us. God offers thanks to the innocent host who would receive God and let God enter and let God be where God would be, in you. And by your welcoming of God, where God would be in you, does God welcome you into Himself. For what is contained in you who welcome God is returned to God. And so we are just celebrating God's wholeness as we welcome God into ourselves. And those who receive Father, Mother, God are one with Father, Mother, God, being host to Father, Mother, God, who created us. And by allowing God to enter, the remembrance of Father, Mother, God enters with God, and with Him they remember the only relationship we ever had. When we invite back in God and our real self to enter where they are in us, then we remember the only relationship we ever had and the only relationship we ever want to have. And remembering this, well, then this will be a time in which a new year will be born from the time of who you are being reborn into the world, the light of the world. And our teacher says to us, I have perfect faith in you to do all that you would accomplish in this time. And in this time of the world, this season in earth, nothing will be lacking, which means you will make complete, which means you will not destroy. In this season where we celebrate the light that we are entering the dark world through us. In this time, our teacher has perfect faith in us to do all that we would accomplish at this time. And our teacher says to us, nothing will be lacking. You will make complete and you won't destroy. And so, because of that, say only this to others and understand it. In this season, in this time, where the light that you are is reborn through you into the world, say this to all others. I give you to the Holy Spirit as part of myself. I know that you will be released unless I want to use you to imprison myself. So in the name of my freedom, I choose your release, brother, sister, recognizing that we will be released together. And if you will say only that to others in this season, in this time where earth is reborn, that who you really are is reborn into the world as a light entering the darkness, so will this year begin in joy and freedom. There is much to do, and we have been long delayed. So accept the holy instant as this year is born, and take your place, so long left unfulfilled, in the Great Awakening. In other words, make this year different by making it all the same. And let all your relationships be made holy for you. This is our will. Amen. Chapter 16, looking at the special relationship. Number 1, true empathy. To empathize does not mean to join in suffering, for joining in suffering is what you must refuse to understand. Suffering is what you must refuse to understand. Joining in suffering is the ego's interpretation of empathy, and joining in the suffering of another in the guise of empathy is always used to form a special relationship in which suffering is shared. The capacity to empathize is very useful to the higher mind, provided that you let the higher mind use empathy in its way. The higher mind's way of empathizing is very different. The higher mind doesn't understand suffering, and the higher mind wants you to teach that suffering is not understandable. When the higher mind, your teacher within, relates through you, it does not relate through your ego to their ego. Your higher mind, the teacher within you, does not join in pain, knowing that healing pain is not accomplished by delusional attempts to enter into the pain and lighten the pain by sharing the delusion. The clearest proof that empathy as the ego uses it is destructive lies in the fact that the ego's empathy is only applied to certain types of problems and in certain people. It's not empathetic to all equally. These certain types of problems and in certain people, the ego selects out and joins forces with, and the ego never joins except to strengthen itself. And having identified what the ego thinks it understands, the ego sees itself, and the ego would increase itself by sharing what is like itself, which is pain, suffering. Make no mistake about this maneuver. The ego always empathizes to weaken, and to weaken is to attack. You do not know what empathizing means, but of this you may be sure. If you will merely sit quietly by and let your teacher within relate through you, then you will empathize with their strength, and then both of you will gain in strength and not in weakness. You do not know what empathizing means, but of this you may be sure. If you will merely sit quietly by and let the teacher within you relate through you, your higher mind will empathize with their strength, and then both of you will gain in strength, which means not weakness. Your part is only to remember this. You don't want anything that you value to come of the relationship. You will neither to hurt the relationship nor heal the relationship in your own way. You don't know what healing is, and all you've learned of empathy is from the past. And there is nothing from the past that you would share, for there is nothing from the past that you would keep. Don't use empathy to make the past real and so perpetuate it. Step gently aside and let healing be done for you. Keep but one thought in mind. That means don't lose sight of it. However tempted you may be to judge the situation and determine your response by judging it, focus your mind only on this. I am not alone, and I would not intrude the past upon my guest. I have invited my guest, my higher mind, my teacher, and my higher mind teacher is here. I need do nothing except not to interfere. That is how you do true empathy, empathy that heals. True empathy is of the one who knows what it is, and you will learn your higher mind's interpretation of empathy if you will let your higher mind use your capacity to empathize for strength and not for weakness. Your teacher friend will not desert you, but be you sure that you desert not your teacher friend. Humility is strength in this sense only, to recognize and accept the fact that you do not know is to recognize and accept the fact that your teacher within does know. You are not sure that your teacher friend within will do its part because you have never yet done your part completely. You will not know how to respond to what you do not understand. Be tempted not to respond to what you don't understand. And don't yield to your ego's triumphant use of empathy for its glory. The triumph of weakness is not what you want to offer to another. The triumph of the ego, the triumph of pain and suffering is not what you want to offer to another. And yet, you know no triumph but the triumph of pain and suffering. That's not knowledge. And the form of empathy that would bring that about is so distorted that it would imprison the very person that it would release and heal. Empathy, as the ego does it, is so distorted that it would imprison the person that your empathy is trying to heal. And that's because the unhealed cannot heal, yet the unhealed have a healer. Don't attempt to teach your higher mind. Don't attempt to teach the healer within. You are the learner, the higher mind within you, the teacher. Do not confuse your role with your teacher's role, because confusing your role with the teacher's role within you will never bring peace to anybody. You confusing your role with higher mind's role in trying to help and heal others ain't going to help anybody. So offer your capacity to empathize to the teacher within you who is here, for it is your teacher's perception and your teacher's strength that you would share with another. And let the teacher within you, who does know how to empathize and who does know how to heal, let this teacher within you offer its strength and its perception to be shared through you. The meaning of love is lost in any relationship which looks to pain and suffering and hopes to find meaning, the meaning of love there. The power of love, which is love's meaning, lies in the strength of God, which hovers over the relationship and blesses the relationship silently by enveloping the relationship in healing wings. The power of love, which is the relationship's real meaning, lies in the strength of God, which hovers over the relationship and blesses the relationship silently by enveloping the relationship in healing wings. That is the meaning, the true meaning of relationships as our teacher sees it. The power of love. which is the relationship's meaning, lies in the strength of God, which hovers over the relationship and blesses the relationship silently by enveloping the relationship in healing wings. Let that be. And don't try to substitute your so-called miracle for that. We once said that if a brother asks a foolish thing of you, to do it. But be certain that this does not mean to do a foolish thing that would hurt either them or you, because what would hurt one will hurt the other. Foolish requests are foolish for the simple reason that they conflict, because these foolish requests contain an element of specialness. Only the higher mind recognizes foolish needs as well as real needs. And your higher mind will teach you how to meet both the foolish need and the real need without losing either. You will be able to meet your foolish need and your real needs only in secrecy. And you will think that by meeting the needs of one, you don't jeopardize another, because you think you can keep your real needs and your foolish needs separate, which means secret from each other. That's not the way. Because trying to keep your foolish needs and your real needs separate and secret from each other, that doesn't lead to light, and that doesn't lead to truth. No needs will long be left unmet if you will leave your needs to the teacher within, to your higher mind, whose function is to meet your needs. Your higher mind's function is to meet your needs. The teacher within you that your Creator gave you to speak for God, its function is to meet your needs, both your foolish needs and your real needs. And this function is your higher mind's function and not your function. It's not your function to meet your foolish and your real needs, both. And your higher mind, your teacher friend within, will not meet your needs secretly, because your teacher friend within would share everything that you give through him. Your teacher friend within, your higher mind, its function is to meet your needs. And it won't meet your needs, foolish and real, secretly, because its function, because it wants to share everything you give through it. And that is why your teacher friend within gives it. What you give through your teacher friend within is for the whole family of God, the whole of creation, not for part of it. What you give through your teacher friend within is for the whole creation, not just for part of it. And so, leave your teacher friend within its function of fulfilling your needs, real and foolish alike, because this teacher friend within will fulfill its function of meeting your needs if you but ask your higher mind to enter your relationships and bless them for you. Your teacher friend within, your higher mind, the voice God gave you to speak for God, will meet all your needs, foolish and real alike, if you but ask the higher mind to enter your relationships and bless them for you.